Welcome back, you lovely... hold on. Welcome back, you lovely nerds. I couldn't think of any props to put on the wall. Unless you want me to paint the wall red with the blood of the many animals PETA has slaughtered. But that's besides the point. This here is a meme, and a pretty good one at that. At least I think so. There's something so delightfully absurd about policing one's language in relation to wetlands. A biome that almost nobody thinks about unless you work with them on a daily basis. Another dimension to this post is that it's a satirization of this 2018 post by PETA, which called for the phasing out of negative phrases involving animals. PETA as an organization is deplorable and is very much worth derision along with their advocacy. However, this one is special. This trash heap of an original post, along with all the offshoots it created, brings up an interesting point about how the language we use can create or indicate biases. As absurd as it may sound, anti-wetland language is a real thing, as evidenced by this easy compilable list of negative phrases involving wetland language and the absence of any positive phrases that use wetland language. Or at least that I could find. Wetlands, with all their wondrous biodiversity, can be rather inhospitable to humans without building out the proper infrastructure. Thick mud, deep water, a lack of land, ambush predators, etc. are all things that we as a species struggle with. And they also all happen to be heavily prevalent within wetland biomes. Thus, the negative association. And just as the meme satirizes, worrying about such an issue is completely worthless. Such biases would be imperceptible in the grand scheme of things when advocating for wildlife preservation and fighting against the encroaching tide of urbanization. To the people who have the means and motive to encroach on these very valuable wetlands, a slight linguistic bias means absolutely nothing, because as we all know, money speaks louder than words. It's a similar story with PETA's meme. These linguistic biases are imperceptible on the grand scheme of things when advocating for animal rights. However, this version is much worse for several reasons. For starters, and unlike the other meme, PETA is either being very genuine or just being fake for rage-baity clicks and engagement, either of which are very stupid and betray the image of the animal-loving protectors that they so desperately want to paint themselves as. Secondly, there are a great multitude of phrases either neutral or positive towards animals. There aren't just negative ones. For every take the bull by the horns, there's a let sleeping dogs lie. For every kill two birds with one stone, there's a till the cows come home. For every be the guinea pig, there's a the bee's knees or the cat's pajamas. You get the point. Thirdly, some of the suggested changes don't even make any sense. Be the guinea pig is absolutely nothing like be the test tube, as a test tube is a conduit through which science takes place, and if you are the guinea pig of an experiment, you are the butt end of the experiment. These two items are not even close to being analogous. feed a fed horse is also pretty rich coming from this list, seeing as overfeeding animals can very easily become abusive. Not like PETA would care anyways. And lastly, PETA is just missing the point entirely. They're brushing over animal language which is actually harmful, like the term pet owner and its ties to the objectification and ownership of animals. And since PETA is obviously not concerned with covering actually important issues, I guess I will have to do the favor for them. To cover this, we must start with some basic groundwork. Traditionally, when we think of ownership, we think of it in a more individualistic context, as opposed to a more broad and social context. As a basic example, think of an individual going to the store to buy a bag of chips for themselves, as opposed to say, a group of 3 friends each splitting the cost of a bag of chips and splitting it together. Now, the reason for this is pretty simple. The way in which society is currently structured places a great emphasis on private property and personal possession, as is dictated by the mechanisms of capitalism. For the purposes of this video, I will solely be referencing this form of ownership, as it is the most common. However, do keep in mind that no matter what form of ownership you have, it does not change the fundamental underlying aspects of ownership. I'm a fucking superstar. Nice job, superstar. As for its definition, ownership is fundamentally about the ability to have categorical control over something. When we give a present, we express our categorical control over that present by relinquishing our categorical control over it and passing that on to the gift receiver. When someone takes something from us without expressed permission, they are interfering with our categorical control over said thing, and thus we feel cheated or stolen from. When we go and buy something from a store, the store is expressing its categorical control over said merchandise by handing it over to us in exchange for us handing over our categorical control of our money. Whether or not we're conscious of it, we have an intuitive understanding of this concept. It's baked into every level of our capitalistic society, and it is reinforced by the legal system, which punishes those who have demonstrably been shown to interfere with our categorical control over money, objects, property, etc. I meant to change into this fit earlier when I started talking about ownership. It has some cute little crabs on it, and I have the lesbian flannel. Also, fuck. Hold on. I hope you like my mug. It's a salmon. It's a salmon mug. Anywho, there has been a preconceived notion underlying this definition of ownership, and despite its subtlety, it holds the key to understanding the concept of ownership and the issues with it. That being, when we think about ownership, traditionally and very often, we think about it in terms of inanimate objects. This is fundamental to ownership's basis, because, well, you can't have fundamental control over something if it can think for itself. It's many issues aside. This is an issue that slavery struggles with, because no matter how you may try to legislate people as property or try to control them, you can't. You cannot turn people into property. It just can't happen. You can't have categorical control over people. In many cases, slaves have revolted, run away, killed themselves, killed their imagine heavy air quotes here, masters, or any other number of perceived undesirable outcomes from the perspective of a slaver. While not wholly analogous, it's a similar situation with animals. Humans certainly have a higher level of consciousness than any other animals in the animal kingdom. However, animals are still conscious. The jellyfish, one of the most basic animals that doesn't even have a central nervous system, still has the capacity to learn and make decisions. Even animals that may function purely off of instinct are still functioning according to themselves. And then, of course, we have the animals that display high levels of cognitive abilities, such as elephants, cows, pigs, primates, dolphins, and many others. Some even display emotions. Cats, dogs, pigs, sheep, and over 100 other animal species have all been observed to emote. Certainly my cat displays a lot of emotion when he's screaming at me to feed him or snuggling up in my lap when it's time for bed. All of this combines to demonstrate the individuality of animals and our inability to have categorical control over them. And yet, for some reason, we still refer to ourselves as pet owners and animal owners. So why is it then that the world is so insistent on legislating them as such? Well, I believe that it makes things logistically easier. I live in the Canadian province of British Columbia, and here it is legal precedent that in matters of divorce, animals and pets are treated as property rather than as children. If you treat an animal as property in a divorce case, then it makes it a lot easier because you don't have to deal with all the, the red tape and the trappings that you might have to deal with when splitting custody with a child. Viewing animals as property also makes them way easier to dehumanize, or desentianize? I'm not exactly sure on the term, but it makes it easier for us to view them as lesser, which then makes the mass production, usually unethically, of animal products way easier. Who's gonna put up a fight if the general populace and the law sees animals as property rather than as individuals? This attitude, when combined with the insatiable greed of capitalism, can lead to abhorrent living conditions for animals. Animals in the food production side of things oftentimes are treated horrendously and put in slave-like conditions, left to fend for themselves against disease and overcrowding, all the while being ridiculously overfed. Pets certainly have it better in most cases, but there are still people who treat pets as nothing but a brick to kick. However annoying they might be, the pet parent crowd is kind of onto something, as the similarities between raising a child and taking care of a pet are strikingly similar. You feed them, nurture them, look after them, provide them shelter, clean up after them, and just let them be themselves so that in return you can see them grow up into the best version of themselves that they can be. Granted, instead of moving out into the big bad world and facing all the challenges of life, your pet just kind of dies on you, but perhaps there's something poetic to be said there. From the experience of someone with a pet who cares for them very much, this attitude of motherhood is way more faithful to the experience of having a pet. They're not a fixture on my wall. They're not a decoration on the door. They're a part of my family that deserves just as much respect as anybody else. I do not own my favorite little guy. I'm not a pet owner. I'm not an animal owner. We can't be. None of us are. And perhaps if PETA focused more on important issues like this, and recording inside meat packing plants and other meat industry or animal industry places, instead of posting inane rage bait garbage and running a kill shelter, then maybe, just maybe, people would like them more. You think? You think they ever fucking thought about that? Jesus fucking Christ. That's it. Video's over. No outro. Like, subscribe. Please check out my other content. Good night, you filthy animals.